Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. You're watching the only breakfast show live from Westminster. Now, as G7 foreign ministers meet for face-to-face talks in London today, there's a renewed focus on how the world's richest nation should be providing COVID vaccines to countries that need them most. We'll talk to the International Trade Secretary Liz Truss in just a moment. Also this hour, ahead of his first electoral test as Labour leader this week, Sir Keir Starmer joins us at 7:30 this morning. Also today, getting back to business, but does the hospitality sector need breathing space before going back to paying full rent? At 8:30, we'll discuss calls to use a rent reprieve system that's helping businesses in Australia. And light in the darkness. At 9:45, we're joined by the award-winning astrophysicist who took the first ever picture of a black hole. It is Tuesday, the 4th of May. A new sobering milestone in India's COVID crisis. Total cases passed 20 million on the day Boris Johnson and the Indian Prime Minister hold talks on the global response. Bill and Melinda Gates, whose charitable foundation has spent billions fighting global diseases, including COVID, announced they're getting a divorce. The latest from Mexico, where 15 people have died and at least 34 are injured after a metro overpass collapsed. Relief for care home residents in England who can now leave their home for outdoor meetings with family without needing to quarantine on their return.
The Atlantic low that brought yesterday's wind and rain has moved away eastwards, but it's left us with a chilly wind, sunshine and showers. Details for the rest of the week coming up before 8:30.
A very good morning to you. Boris Johnson will hold talks with the Indian Prime Minister today after India, now the epicentre of the COVID pandemic, passed 20 million coronavirus cases. The UK is facing new calls to use its presidency of the G7 to prioritise the equal distribution of COVID vaccines to countries like India, which are in the most desperate need. It comes as India's healthcare system struggles to cope with nearly 3,500 more deaths reported this morning. Well, let's talk to our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, who's in New Delhi for us this morning. I mean, clearly a dire situation, Alex.
Terrible situation. The Indian health service was not very robust in the first place, and this has completely overwhelmed it. So there isn't a city, a town or a village that hasn't been very, very badly affected by overwhelming numbers of sick people. The World Health Organization mentioned that just in the last month of April, there has been more coronavirus cases throughout the world, largely because of India and Brazil, than there were 6 months previously during the pandemic. And India is setting global record highs in the number of daily infections every day. It has done pretty much for the last 12 days. Now, that is staggering and means that this hospital, one of the ones that we've spent a day in, is utterly overwhelmed with the number of people coming into its emergency department, with the number of people in it needing intensive care treatment. There are so many beds inside their ICU that the nurses can barely squeeze between them. And as the deaths mount up, the only way that you can get into that ICU is if someone dies and there's a spare bed. The people in the emergency department are sometimes staying there for 5-6 days. One of the nurses told me she had 5 people collapse whilst in the emergency department waiting to be taken to ICU. Another 2 arrived here at the emergency department already dead. So people are struggling all over the capital. There is not enough oxygen, or at least the oxygen supplies are not getting to the hospitals. We've had queues and queues of people waiting outside trying to buy oxygen. And even though overnight the Indian government organised what they're calling the Oxygen Express, a trainload of 6 huge liquid oxygen cylinders for the capital, we've already had SOSs from various hospitals around the capital this morning. And these are non-COVID hospitals. One was from a children's hospital, a non-COVID children's hospital, which is finding it needs oxygen and it's running out of it. So this is having a knock-on impact. There are not just coronavirus deaths, there are deaths from lack of oxygen and the supply chain literally crumbling.
OK. Look, Alex, we'll talk to you a little bit later on. For now, thank you. Well, three large union bodies have written to the International Trade Secretary Liz Truss today, calling on the UK to use its G7 presidency to increase vaccine supplies to countries like India, which are most in need. And Liz Truss joins me now. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Clearly, when we look at the situation in India, it is absolutely dire. What more can we do?
Well, it's a heartbreaking situation in India, and my heart goes out to the people of India and the severe problems they're facing. The United Kingdom has already sent 600 pieces of equipment out. We're sending oxygen out, and we've got another shipment going out this week as well. And we're working very, very closely with partners across the world to make sure India has the supplies it needs. And of course, India was of huge help to the United Kingdom last year, making sure we had the paracetamol we need. They're a close ally of the United Kingdom, and we really are working hard to make sure that we can help as much as possible.
I mean, Christian Aid have said now that most British people in high-risk categories have been vaccinated, we now need to start sharing our vaccine supplies with nations like India urgently.
Well, we're already part of the COVAX programme, which is about supplying vaccines around the world. We're the third largest donor. Of course, the AstraZeneca vaccine is being produced in India, and that has been done under voluntary licence. And I'm working very closely with Dr. Ngozi at the World Trade Organization to see what more we can do to ramp up vaccine supply across the world, because you're absolutely right. Nobody is safe until everybody is safe, and we need to make sure that we increase supply as much as possible, of course, to continue with our vaccination programme here in the UK, but also to make sure the people of India are vaccinated and across the world. But in terms of India, the immediate issue is oxygen. That is our focus. That is the product that we're getting out to India as rapidly as possible, because that is the immediate issue they're facing. But I have a call later today with my Indian counterpart. We're talking about the free trade agreement negotiations, but we're also talking about what more we can do to help this immediate crisis in India.
In terms of the trade deal, which has been announced today, I mean, it is significant. You're looking at £1 billion of new UK-India trade and investment that is being announced today. That is hugely significant, but why is it not a free trade deal?
So, first of all, this is a significant announcement. It's going to mean 6,000 new jobs in the United Kingdom, including areas like vaccination. So we've got the Serum Institute of India investing more in the United Kingdom. There are also going to be more opportunities in India, because this is about a win-win for both countries. It's about helping India with the immediate COVID crisis, but also helping India build back better after the COVID crisis. We will start negotiations on a full free trade agreement this autumn. Of course, free trade agreements take longer. What this is the immediate gains that we can get for both countries, driving jobs and growth here in Britain and in India.
How quickly do you think then you can work with this in place? How quickly can you then work towards a free trade deal?
We want to launch negotiations in autumn. We want to get those negotiations completed as soon as possible. But of course, we'll be looking for early wins that we can gain for both countries. So, for example, there are currently very high tariffs on cars into India, on products like whisky into India. We want to see those tariffs lowered or removed to benefit industries here in Britain. And similarly, there are products from India that we want to see here in the United Kingdom. And if you think about it, India is the world's largest democracy. It's a rapidly growing economy. Currently, our trade is 24 billion. We think we can double that by 2030. And this is where Britain needs to be. We need to be trading with those fast-growing parts of the world to the benefit of British people right across the country.
Can I ask you about the allegations still circling around Number 10? Because obviously we're now in an election week, got the local elections on Thursday. How damaging do you think these allegations are in the run-up to a local election?
Well, I've been out campaigning in the elections across the country, and what people want to know is they want to know, what are my opportunities going to be? How fast is the government getting on with the vaccination programme? We just had the announcement yesterday. We've done 50 million vaccines across the UK. They want to know that we are on track with our roadmap for getting out of the COVID lockdown. That's what people are concerned about. And I think these allegations and counter rumours from what's going on in Number 10 are of very, very little interest to people across the country. What they want to know is how we're dealing with COVID, how the vaccination programme is going, and how we're building jobs and growth. Today, we're announcing these 6,000 more jobs thanks to our trade agreement with India.
There are reports, though, in some of the papers this morning, and the Times particularly, saying there are ministers, some of your cabinet colleagues, who are concerned about how this is going to play out this week. Are you one of those ministers?
I'm 100% focused on my job of getting new trade deals for the United Kingdom, bringing jobs and growth across the United Kingdom, getting more of our fantastic companies exporting their cars, their food and drink products, their IT products around the world. That's my focus, and that's what my cabinet colleagues are focused on, and that's what the Prime Minister is focused on. He spends every waking hour thinking about how we're dealing with COVID, our vaccination programme, and this is frankly a distraction from those really important issues that people care about.
Without looking at the allegations particularly, because we know they've been, the Labour Party can say one thing, we're hearing another thing from Downing Street. They are being denied, there are investigations underway, we get that. I'm not asking you to comment on whether you think the Prime Minister has done anything wrong, he's denied it. But the fact that Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, said if codes had been broken, then the Prime Minister should resign. As a matter of principle, do you agree with that?
Well, the Prime Minister is very clear that he's covered the cost of these refurbishments, that he's been working with officials, that he's declared in line with the appropriate rules. But I'm not going to answer hypotheticals about what might happen at some future date. What the Prime Minister has made clear is he has covered the costs. I think the British public understand that. They want us to get on with the job, which is delivering the vaccine programme and making sure we recover our economy after COVID and that we have the jobs and growth we need across the UK.
Yeah, but even if we were sort of pose the question in the way of saying if any Prime Minister of any party...
That's an even more hypothetical question. I mean, that's an even more hypothetical question.
But there is a general rule, is that if someone breaks a ministerial code, they're expected to go. And I know that ultimate decision is made by the Prime Minister, but,
The Prime Minister has been very clear that he has covered the costs of these refurbishments. If you speak to voters across the country, which I've been doing during these elections, they fully understand. They think that's completely reasonable. OK. Look,
can we talk holidays? Because I'm sure you're desperate for a holiday, like we all are. Do you think we are going to be able to get away from May the 17th?
Well, we won't have much longer to wait to get the full announcement from the Travel Task Force. I would suggest that people wait for that announcement. Of course, we're doing all we can to make sure that we follow our roadmap, that we open up the economy and travel gradually. But the really important thing is that we don't move too fast and jeopardise the progress we've made. So people will have to wait a bit longer, I'm afraid, to be able to hear the news on exactly what's happening on the travel front. But I can assure you the government's working very hard. I
mean, bring it in gradually is one thing. I mean, there's talk of this big bang reopening. Thomas Cook have said their bookings are 50% higher this week than last. I mean, people are chomping at the bit.
Of course, I fully understand. It's been a very, very tough year for people. People haven't had the opportunity to travel either within the UK or overseas for some time. People are looking to book a holiday, but I would encourage people to wait until we make that announcement so that we can see exactly what the details are based on the data, because what we don't want to be doing is re-importing this virus after we've done such an excellent job in getting the levels down in the United Kingdom. So, of course, we fully support safe travel. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity, but we need to be cautious and we need to make sure that we're not simply importing the virus after we've successfully dealt with it in Britain.
But to paraphrase Layla Moran, who's the head of the all-party parliamentary group on coronavirus, she said it is crazy to look at reopening airports. She said airports could be a breeding ground for the virus. She's very concerned and says the group is very concerned about bringing new variants back in. They want to see this all delayed at this stage.
Well, we are doing this in a very safe way. So we've got a very strong testing procedure in place for travel. We have a strong quarantine regime, and any opening up of travel will be made fully safe. And of course, that is why we're taking our time. The Transport Secretary is working very closely with airports to make sure that these procedures work. But I think it's absolutely right that once we are able to, we do open these corridors up, because first of all, it's important for trade. It's important for economic opportunities. It's important for jobs and growth here in Britain. It's important for people with family connections around the world to be able to visit and see their families. And of course, if we are able to have people go on holiday, I don't see any reason they shouldn't, provided it's safe. But that is the key question that the task force is determining. Is it safe? Which countries is it safe with? And we will make announcements in due course. But I don't think it will be too much longer before we make those announcements. So I would encourage people to wait for those latest announcements.
But you see, there is a sort of pressing issue here, isn't there? We're talking on, potentially the 17th of May. We haven't had the traffic light system announced yet. We're expecting that on the 1st. So we don't know which countries we can go to and come back without quarantining. We don't know quite what's happening with the NHS app and the COVID passports or test certification. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to cram in a very short space of time. Are you on track to do that?
We are, and I know my colleagues across government are working very hard to make sure that we've got those procedures in place. And as has been said, we need to make sure that we do have the setup correct at the airports, that we do have the mechanisms right before we go ahead and make that announcement. So people are understandably, frustrated. It's been a long year that we've faced this COVID crisis, but I think this approach of taking things gradually, of making sure that they're irreversible, has been the right approach, and people can have confidence that when we make the announcement, we'll have everything in place.
Minister, really good to see you this morning.
Nice
Thank you.
To see you.
Just a reminder, if you want to see any of that again, you can do, or watch the programme when you're out and about this morning. Then just head to the Sky News website or the Sky News app. You can watch the programme on our live blog as well. And you can catch up with any of the interviews on my Twitter account as well. That's @SkyStephen. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Joe Pike, who is listening to all of that. Joe?
Well, lots of interesting lines there. Firstly, on India and the COVID situation there, the Minister's saying another shipment of supplies will leave this week, going to India, not wanting to answer any questions about vaccine diplomacy, about vaccines being given to India or other countries, merely focusing on this COVAX system, the UK's third largest donor. I thought interesting on this trade story that's around today, some trade deals signed with India. Liz Truss clearly pleased about that. But when is the free trade deal with India going to be secured? She said negotiations would launch in the autumn, but we've got to remember India may want the UK to ease its visa regulations after we've tightened up immigration after leaving Brexit. That may not be what Priti Patel and Boris Johnson want to do. Again, avoiding those questions on sleaze and whether Boris Johnson would have to resign if he broke the ministerial code. And finally, on holidays, not much longer to wait, she says. We know that the task force are meeting this week, so we should know this week which countries are on the green list for us to travel abroad from May the 17th.
OK, Joe, thank you. And still to come this morning, fighting talk. At 7:30, we're going to be talking to Sir Keir Starmer to discuss his open letter to the nation ahead of his first electoral test as Labour leader on Thursday. No one should have to suffer like my parents did. The rallying call of Jeremy Daubney, who's about to embark on a nationwide cycle challenge to raise money for the Mind Association and brain tumour charities. He's joining us at 8:45. And at 9:30, laughter is the best medicine. Well, we know that, don't we? We're going to talk to Jane Horrocks and Samson Kayo about their new Sky comedy Bloods, which follows the story of a pair of paramedics. Now, just to update on the breaking news in the last hour, and at least 15 people have died, 34 injured after a metro overpass in Mexico City collapsed. That happened about 10:30 local time. They'll be, about 6 hours behind us here in the UK, I think. These are live pictures from the crash site. It happened on Mexico City's Metro Line 12, the construction of which has been plagued by complaints and accusations of irregularities. Now, the billionaire philanthropists Bill and Melinda Gates have announced they're getting divorced after 27 years of marriage. The Microsoft co-founder and his wife are one of the richest couples in the world, and through their foundation, they've spent billions fighting global diseases and encouraging vaccinations in children. In the statement, they said they no longer believe we can grow together as a couple. Aisha Zahid reports.
They were the ultimate power couple. Together, they created a charitable foundation more than 20 years ago. It went on to spend more than £36 billion fighting diseases from malaria to polio, and more recently, COVID-19. In 2016, their work around the world was recognised by President Barack Obama, who awarded them the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now Bill and Melinda Gates say they are separating. In identical statements posted on social media, they said, "Over the last 27 years, we have raised 3 incredible children and built a foundation that works all over the world to enable people to lead healthy, productive lives. We continue to share a belief in that mission and will continue our work together at the foundation. But we no longer believe we can grow together as a couple in this next phase of our lives." According to Forbes magazine, Bill Gates is the 4th wealthiest person in the world. He made his money from Microsoft, which he co-founded in 1975, and turned into one of the world's most valuable technology firms. Bill and Melinda met at the company in 1987 and married 7 years later.
Well, we were engaged to be married, and after we'd taken our first trip to Africa, actually a vacation, we were walking on the beach, and we committed at that point that we were going to give the vast majority of the resources from Microsoft back to society. It was the right thing for us to do.
And they've been vocal about the need for vaccine equity. Last month, in an interview with Sky News, Bill Gates sent this message to the world's richest nations.
The US and the UK will be the first countries that will have the excess vaccines, and will, use these mechanisms to get them out to where the death rate is the highest.
While the couple are separating, they say the foundation will remain intact, and so too will their legacy together. Aisha Zahid, Sky News.
Well, let's have a look at some of the morning's other main stories for you. And family and friends have gathered to mourn the death of Andrew Brown, a black man killed by police in North Carolina in April. Civil rights leader Al Sharpton attended the funeral and called for police reform and the release of the full body cam video of the incident. Mr. Brown's death occurred the day after former police officer Derek Chauvin was convicted of the murder of George Floyd. The Treasury is offering to help about 700,000 people with financial difficulties and debt. The scheme, named Breathing Space, means people will be given a 60-day break from their creditors while they get access to professional debt advice or mental health treatment. Campaigners are calling on the government to rewild the oceans in order for the UK to reach its net zero carbon emissions goal by 2050. The Marine Conservation Society says Britain's coastal waters should be given the same level of urgency as reforestation, highlighting that they store about 205 million tonnes of carbon, 50 million more than the UK's forests. Now, it's a slow step towards freedom for those living in care homes, but from today, residents in England can go out on day trips away from home without having to self-isolate for 14 days on their return. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Katerina Vitozzi, who's at a care home in Greater Manchester. There must be a huge sense of relief, Katerina.
Yeah, there are just under 40 residents at this care home, as you say, in Bury, and for them today will be the first day for the vast majority that they've been able to step foot outside of the grounds of the place that they call home. There will still be certain restrictions around those visits. For now, residents will only be able to go on what the Department of Health and Social Care has termed low-risk visits. That means they can sit outside in a private garden, they can go for a walk and sit in a park, and they'll also be able to go indoors to vote in local elections this week without then having to come back and do 14 days isolation upon their return. But indoor visits for now, if they go for a medical appointment, those restrictions are still in place, but it is still a small but significant step towards a sense of a normality for many of the people that live here. Let's speak to the manager of this care home, it's Stacey Aston, to get a sense of what the past year has been like. Stacey, a significant day, I assume, one that you welcome probably hasn't come soon enough.
Absolutely. It's going to be amazing for residents just to be able to go out and see a bit of normality again, see other people, see people, even if it's just a walk in the park and see other people. You know, see their families, go and visit their sons, their daughters in their gardens, and obviously not on a day like today, but go and sit and have a cup of tea in a garden with their loved ones. It's going to be amazing.
And do you feel like it has been a long time coming? I mean, until now, if people had even wanted to do this, would have had to have isolated for 14 days. Did that seem right to you?
Absolutely not. It's unfair. I appreciate that they are the most vulnerable to COVID-19, but, you know, we've got to stop living in a world of fear and creating the fear there is the fear out there, but we've got to stop living under this blanket rule of oh, we can't go there, we can't do this. You know, these people are in their twilight years, you know, so it's really important that they get out there and live life as normally as possible.
And we are going to speak to residents a little bit later. I think they're just enjoying waking up at a nice cup of tea and breakfast at the moment. But you were talking to us about one resident called Mr. Walker, who's been, you know, doing loops of the gardens for the past year. What will it mean to people like him to be able to step foot outside?
It'll be amazing. He'll just be able to, like I said, go for a walk around a local park, go home and have a cup of tea in his garden with his wife. It'll be absolutely brilliant. He won't be limited to the grounds here. Like I say, it'll just be so good to just open up the world again, open up their world again, so that they can get out and see a bit of normality instead of being stuck in, I mean, it's beautiful grounds, but being stuck in the grounds of the care home. They can get out and see people and see life going back to normal.
Wonderful, Stacey. A very emotional day, I'm sure it will be for all the staff here, seeing your residents being able to go outside for the first day. Unfortunately, as Stacey said, the weather here isn't looking particularly bright for now, but these rights, and it's not just for today. Today is the first day, but it will be the small step towards greater freedoms now for the foreseeable.
Yeah, Katerina, thank you. Somehow I don't think the weather will matter too much to those people getting out and about, but let's see exactly what it's going to do for you. Isabel, morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Yes, yesterday, of course, was really quite wild, wet and windy. That particular low has moved away eastwards, but it's left us in this cold, showery air mass. Let's take a look.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, this opening shot really paints the picture then. This is the depression or the area of low pressure that gave us the wind and rain yesterday. Gusts of 76 miles an hour in North Wales. That particular low pulling away eastwards, northerly winds coming in, bringing showers to many places. Some fairly persistent wet weather as well across some central areas. It does look as though more southern areas could get away with at least some sunny spells at times and might just find temperatures get up to about 13 or 14 on the south coast, with the winds easing a touch there this afternoon. But many areas rather cloudy, cool and with quite a bit of wet weather as well as those showers feed in around that area of low pressure. But later it does look as though it'll be a bit brighter in the far north of Scotland. Now, as we head our way through this evening and tonight, this showery area moves southwards. There will be a bit of a frost under clearer skies elsewhere. And later in the night, actually, we'll put in some wintry showers across the north of Scotland. Snow mainly up over the hills, but something to watch for tomorrow. Otherwise, it's one of those days where it might start off bright and dry, but showers will break through, and there'll be further showers on Thursday as well.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Isabel, thank you. This is Sky News Breakfast. Still to come, we'll talk to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, in just a couple of minutes. Now, in the last few minutes, the International Trade Secretary has told Sky News the UK is seeing what it can do to increase vaccine supply to India after the country passed 20 million COVID cases.
The United Kingdom has already sent 600 pieces of equipment out. We're sending oxygen out, and we've got another shipment going out this week as well. And we're working very, very closely with partners across the world to make sure India has the supplies it needs. And of course, India was of huge help to the United Kingdom last year, making sure we had the paracetamol we need. They're a close ally of the United Kingdom, and we really are working hard to make sure that we can help as much as possible.
I mean, Christian Aid have said now that most British people in high-risk categories have been vaccinated, we now need to start sharing our vaccine supplies with nations like India urgently.
Well, we're already part of the COVAX programme, which is about supplying vaccines around the world. We're the third largest donor. Of course, the AstraZeneca vaccine is being produced in India, and that has been done under voluntary licence. And I'm working very closely with Dr. Ngozi at the World Trade Organization to see what more we can do to ramp up vaccine supply across the world, because you're absolutely right. Nobody is safe until everybody is safe, and we need to make sure that we increase supply as much as possible, of course, to continue with our vaccination programme here in the UK, but also to make sure the people of India are vaccinated and across the world.
Well, let's talk to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. Are we meeting our responsibilities as a nation when it comes to the pandemic?
Well, across the world, obviously, there's huge concern, particularly in India. And I think that the more we can do to assist India, the better. And I know the government is already taking steps in that direction, and I urge them to increase that where they can. It's got to be a global response, but I think it is a reminder that notwithstanding the successful rollout of the vaccine here, we won't be truly through this, until across the world we've got the virus completely under control. And I think many, many people will be distressed looking at the situation currently in India.
Can we talk about the elections this week? We've got local elections, we've got a by-election.
Yep.
I mean, the Labour Party has been accused of being, well, a little bit policy light going into these elections.
Well, what we've said is there should be 400,000 new jobs created, bringing forward initiatives due for the next 5 years in low-carbon areas. We've said there should be a guarantee for young people that if young people have been out of work for 6 months or so, they should be in education, they should be in training, or they should have a job guarantee. We said we want more police officers on the beat, on the streets, not behind desks. And we've been very clear about bringing down antisocial behaviour and a fair reward for those on the front line, particularly the NHS. Now, they've been our priorities, and my job as leader of the Labour Party is to make it absolutely clear that I've got a burning desire to build a better future for our country, and that Thursday is the first opportunity to take a step towards that and to demonstrate that the priorities of the Labour Party that I lead are the priorities of the British public.
But if those priorities are ones that resonate with the British public, then the polls must make just some disappointing reading for you. I mean, after there's a scandal surrounding number 10 at the moment. We've got this huge recession, the biggest, most aggressive recession facing the G7 because of the pandemic, which, is understandable. And yet you still are trailing in the polls. I mean, quite significantly in some places.
Well, there's no getting away from the fact that we lost the last general election in December 2019 very badly, the worst loss we've had since 1935. And my job as leader of the Labour Party is to rebuild our party, reconnect with the public, rebuild trust. That will take time. But the most important thing is that I make it clear that I understand that every vote has to be earned. It's why I've been across the United Kingdom talking to people in different communities, been in Hartlepool 3 times, talking about the jobs of the future, things that really matter. But, I know we've got to earn every vote. I know that we've got to rebuild out of that devastating loss in 2019. It's a mountain to climb, but we're climbing it.
I mean, forgive me, though. I mean, when you talk about Hartlepool, that there is one poll out this morning, admittedly it's one poll that we've seen that's got Labour 9 points down at the moment.
Yeah, I've been in Hartlepool 3 times. We're having thousands of conversations with voters in Hartlepool, with the teams that we've got there. There is a positive response, but we've got to build on that. We've got to earn every vote in Hartlepool. And, in Hartlepool, the things that people have said to me matter most to them. There's a nuclear power plant in Hartlepool coming to the end of its natural life, and everybody wants to know what's the next generation of jobs there. There's 750 Hartlepool jobs tied up in that power station. I was at Liberty Steel on Saturday morning, 250 people there, really worried, steel workers worried about their jobs. And that is what matters most in Hartlepool. It's why Hartlepool needs a powerful Labour voice to stick up for those jobs and stick up for the next generation.
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to the question, if that's what matters most and you think that's what Labour can deliver, then why are people not flocking to the Labour Party, according to the latest polls? I mean, it begs the question as to whether you have pitched things in the right way in the run-up to this. You've gone all out on the sleaze allegations. Has that been the right approach?
Well, we've put first and foremost, actually, jobs, the NHS frontline, and getting crime under control and dealing with antisocial behaviour. They're our priorities. Of course, we have shone a torch on the sleaze because what we've seen recently is clear evidence that those at the top of government feel that the rules just don't apply to them, whether that's contracts on WhatsApp groups, whether it's privileged access, or whether it's refurbishment of flats, a general sense that there's one rule for them and another rule for everybody else. And coming out of a pandemic, when people have really struggled for a year or more, the idea that somehow it's priced in that that's how the government behaves, I think is completely wrong.
And yet, you're a year into the job. You've got a lifelong Labour voter down in, was it Bristol or Bath, throwing you out of his pub, saying, you'd let him down as Labour leader. It's a big obstacle to overcome. You don't seem to be managing it at the moment.
Well, since you put that example to me, let's just be clear about what the argument was about. That landlord believed that only old people were dying in the virus, and therefore there was no need for a lockdown, no need for restrictions. Particularly since my wife works in the hospital, having seen what was happening at the height of the pandemic with over 1,000 people dying every day, I profoundly disagree with that. Now, he's entitled to his view, of course he is. I am never going to agree with the view that we didn't need a lockdown and that the virus is only killing old people. I'm sorry, I don't.
You're quoted in the Times this morning as saying you will take full responsibility for these election results when we get to sift through them Friday morning. If you don't do well, if you don't take Hartlepool, if you don't make significant inroads in the local elections, does that mean you're going to go?
Well, look, I do take full responsibility for these election results. I take full responsibility for everything that the Labour Party does under my leadership, just as I took full responsibility for everything the Crown Prosecution Service did when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. That is what leadership is about. I am clear that my job as leader of the Labour Party is to rebuild the Labour Party from where we were in December 2019 with the worst result since 1935 into a position where we can win the next general election. That is a mountain to climb. We are climbing that mountain. My job is to make it clear that the priorities of the Labour Party under my leadership are the priorities of the British people, and that we will face...
Look, forgive me for jumping in. I know we're really tight for time, but if you say you're taking responsibility, what does that mean if it doesn't work out the way you want by Friday morning?
We are fighting for every vote into this election on Thursday, earning every vote. That's why I'm out pretty well every hour of daylight, fighting for those votes alongside the team that we've got. We'll go into Thursday with a very positive message about the change that we want to make for our country for the better, and indicating that this is the first step towards that change. The job of rebuilding the Labour Party was never going to be completed in a year or so. I don't think anybody realistically thought that, but these are a very, very important set of elections for us.
Sir Keir Starmer, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, let's talk to our political correspondent, Joe Pike. Joe?
I think the Labour leader was in expectation management mode there, saying right towards the end of that interview, Stephen, that he wouldn't expect everything to have been solved in a year, pointing to the last general election, the worst for Labour since 1935, saying rebuilding Truss will take time, every vote has to be earned. I'm sure he's seen one poll this morning, a small sample size, but showing that Conservatives may be ahead as much as 17 points in Hartlepool. This Labour seat since the mid-1970s could go Conservative. And the reason people are looking towards Hartlepool is because it's the only Westminster seat that's up for election, the only by-election, and because we're going to get that result overnight on Thursday night, it'll probably have an unfairly prominent role in painting the narrative for this whole sort of series of electoral events. Keir Starmer wants to talk about NHS and jobs, saying he's been positive, but of course he's also been talking about Conservative sleaze. Not a huge amount of signs yet that those sleaze stories are really impacting the Conservative vote, but of course only one poll really matters, and that is on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, thank you. Well, still to come on Sky News Breakfast for you this morning, care home residents in England regain some freedoms as low-risk visits are allowed from today. Now, from today, care home residents in England will be able to visit family and friends outside without having to quarantine on their return. This marks the most significant easing of restrictions for care homes, and the government says it remains on track for lifting more rules later this month. Well, let's talk to Dr. Sanjeev Kanoria, who is the owner of Advinia Healthcare. Good to see you this morning. What impact in real terms is this going to have on residents?
Good morning. It's a very good initiative that the government has taken. It will improve their mental well-being. As we know, loneliness and isolation causes increased anxiety, particularly when you have dementia. So I think it's a very good initiative that the government has taken.
How difficult has it been for your residents to deal with that lack of direct contact with family and friends?
As you can appreciate, when people are in a care home, it is very depressing and very stressful when they cannot make contact with people whom they know. And particularly when you have dementia, it is the people whom you know which helps you manage your situation and manage your emotions. So I think it is very, very important that these initiatives are being now taken when the infection rates have come down and vaccination rates have increased throughout the country. And the risk of infection we have seen in the last second wave, the number of care home deaths that have happened in care homes have been very, very low. Particularly in our group, we have seen very few care deaths happening as a result of COVID.
We know these visits have to be what the government is describing as, well, not just low risk, actually, but no risk visits. I mean, how are you going to be able to assess what is happening when people are out and about?
There are a lot of restrictions that have been placed within the care home if visitors come to the care home themselves. But if people are going outside, it is impossible to put restrictions. However, because the residents have been vaccinated, the risk of them coming back with an infection will be much lower. But at this moment in time, 95% of care home residents have received the first dose. Almost 72% have received the second dose. So the vaccination has really helped curb this infection, but we cannot be complacent. The risk is still there. There's still infection in the community, and we have to be careful.
Just briefly, I mean, do you think there will be further? Are you on track for further restrictions being eased by the 17th of May?
Yes, we are. And I think those will really help us. And all the data and the statistics show that infection rates have come down, death rates have come down, and it is important that restriction starts to be lifted slowly and gradually. Okay. But again, we cannot be complacent. We have to be careful.
Well, look, let's hope this proves to be a good day for those of your people who are getting out and about today. Dr. Kanori, good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, a survey carried out by unions and charities warns about a third of government-maintained nursery schools are facing cuts to staff and services. These nurseries are funded by local authorities, so they haven't been able to access the coronavirus relief schemes aimed at the private sector. Milena Veselinovic reports.
Ava and George go to a government-funded nursery twice a week.
Well done, you're amazing.
This allows their mum Lucy to go to college. She wants to build a career and a brighter future for her children, and free nursery places have enabled her to pursue that goal.
If I didn't have access, then I'd have to drop out and I wouldn't be able to go to university. It would have an impact on my child's life. Without it, I wouldn't be able to go and I wouldn't be able to pursue my wanted career, which is midwifery. I wouldn't be able to do it at all without the nursery.
Should you put some on here?
But maintained nursery schools like the one her children attend are facing a funding crisis. They're financed by local authorities, so they can't access COVID relief schemes that help the private sector. And unions and charities warn almost a third of them are cutting staff and services.
The impact of losing these schools will hit the most vulnerable children the hardest. They have a particular role in supporting children with special educational needs and disabilities. If the nursery schools weren't there, these children might have nowhere else to go.
Stop!
Maintained nurseries are located in some of the most deprived areas of the country. But unions say they've had little or no access to extra COVID funds provided to schools. And for those running them, the work during the pandemic went well beyond the classroom.
We were a lifeline and we were picking up situations that families are in. So, you know, if families were isolated and had no one to get shopping, we were helping them with that. You know, sometimes, you know, single parents who were isolating with their families were on their own. And we were the only voice at the end of the phone sometimes.
For many, the support these nurseries give is life-changing. They're now appealing to the government to support them. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
Oh, children making a mess. What could be better? I remember it well. OK, let's have a look at the weather for you today with Isabel.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, this is the low that brought us yesterday's wind and rain. That's now eased away from the east coast and pushing towards Denmark and southern Scandinavia. That allows northerly winds to come in with really quite cold air, and there'll be showers as well, with quite a lot of organisation to the showers across more central parts of the country, particularly North Wales, northern England into southern Scotland. So persistent showery weather here, a bit of snow for the mountain tops possible. And in the south, well, you will find some showers, but here more scattered with some sunshine in between. Temperatures up to 14 on the south coast. And hopefully later, the cloud breaking enough to give some late sunshine in northern Scotland. But as we head through this evening and tonight, well, this showery bank pushes southwards down to the southwest. There'll be a frost under clearer skies in central areas. And then during the day tomorrow, the cloud will bubble up again, and it's another chilly one with sunshine and showers.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Isabel, thank you. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, we'll bring you more on India's COVID crisis as the country passes 20 million cases. Calls for the international community to do more.